What is going on, everyone? My name is Andy. Welcome back to another FPL video. In this one, it's my team selection for Game Week 7. So I'm going to run you through how the team is looking post-wildcard, thoughts on transfers for this week and in the future as well. And of course, a quick discussion about captaincy. And I'll show you how I got on in Game Week 6, which I'm sure you know by now was absolutely terrible. But I've got to relive it one more time. If you enjoyed the video, make sure to give it a like. Hit that subscribe button if you haven't done so already. Let's get into it. So let's start with Game Week 6. And I know I've talked about it a little bit already this week, but I want to keep the consistency with the team selection video. So let's do a quick review. I got 33 points after playing my wildcard. That was a Game Week rank of 8.8 million, about as bad as it's ever going to get. And my overall rank dropped from 1.3 to 2.7 million. It really couldn't have gone any worse. But because everything went wrong, it didn't feel so bad. I know that sounds stupid to say. It doesn't make sense. But in game weeks where you score like 50 or 60 points, but everyone else is getting 80 or 90 because there's a high-owned player that you don't have that scored another brace, another hat-trick, whatever it might be, I find those weeks much more frustrating. This one, I just had to laugh it off because what else could I do? Like literally, I've got double Arsenal defence. They concede hardly any chances to Leicester at home, and yet they concede 2 goals, right? 1 pointers for Gabriel and Raya. After all that discussion on Saturday morning about whether Raya would or would not be available, Trent Alexander-Arnold against Wolves away blanks. Bruno Fernandes gets his first red card ever in the Man United shirt. Arsenal score 4 goals against Leicester, Saka blanks. Haaland gets his first blank of the season. All these things can happen. Of course, Arsenal are not going to keep clean sheets every week. Haaland's not going to return braces and hat-tricks every week. But for it to all happen at once, I just found it quite funny, to be honest with you. In terms of how I went with this squad on wildcard, essentially most of it was locked in by Saturday morning. The only thing I was really considering was something like Fernandes and a 4.5 like Pinnock, or Eze and Porro. I wasn't really looking at anything else. Palmer was someone that was in some drafts, but realistically I was never going to go for him. Because if I did, it would have been Fernandes to Palmer, and then Solanke to a cheap forward like Chris Wood, and then Trent out as well. And I just didn't want to make those downgrades. And obviously in hindsight now, I'm looking at it thinking, well, do I really need Trent with the fixtures they've got coming up? I definitely don't need Bruno. Palmer would be much better. I obviously would have been better off going with that kind of draft, but it was never something I massively considered, so I'm not particularly worried about it. And look, Fernandes got a red card. It's not great, -2 points. He's not suspended, as we know, going forward. But the other player that everyone wanted me to put in was Luis Diaz. And I just had a feeling it wasn't the right time to buy him. He blanked, so I haven't missed out on a huge amount of points. And what did I say would happen at some point? He would blank and then maybe miss a game, which could happen this week because he played last night in the Champions League. And as soon as that happens, people will panic about him going forward. I'm telling you now, I'm going to get tons of questions tomorrow and on Saturday morning. Is Diaz going to start? Have we got early team news? Is Diaz going to start? And he might do because he only played 71 minutes last night. But it's not a guarantee. Diaz owners, most of them, will now be worried that Gakpo is going to start against Palace instead. And I just didn't want that headache, especially with Chelsea at home in 8 and Arsenal away in 9. So I just went for Bruno Fernandes, the safer pick instead. And it looks stupid now because he's got -2. But let's judge it over the next few weeks when he's got his good fixtures coming up. Man United have got really good fixtures from Game Week 8 onwards. So that's basically how I ended up on him. And people are absolutely fixated on that one pick, despite the fact that only 3 players returned for me. Solanke, Semenyo, and Mbeumo. But all the comments are about Bruno Fernandes. One player where instead I could have just had Diaz with 2 points. So yes, 4 points extra, I get that. But that red card, as we now know, should never have happened. So Bruno should have walked away with a 1-pointer. Then we're talking a 1-point difference. So everyone's absolutely fixated on it. It's kind of crazy, to be honest with you. So many comments about that pick this week, but I think it might be fine going forward. So yeah, that's the wildcard squad, and obviously I'll talk about all these players again in a minute, but that's it. Semenyo, Solanke, and Mbeumo, the only players that returned for me. Absolute disaster. The good news is, it probably can't get any worse. So let's look at Game Week 7. So coming off the back of the wildcard, I've only got 1 free transfer. I've actually only saved up to 2 free transfers once this season, and I used them to buy Salah for his 1 assist against Bournemouth in Game Week 5. And since then, things have been a bit of a disaster, but it's done now, and I'm hoping that moving forward, as I'm fairly happy with my squad, I'm not going to have to make a huge amount of transfers and I can start rolling some. Because as I've said in previous videos this week, around game weeks 10 to 12, there's going to be some big decisions about, do I get Salah? How do I do that? Do I need to sell Haaland? Do I want to get Palmer? If so, do I sell Saka to do it, or do I try and get him in as well? I'm going to need transfers to move those kind of players in and out. And so I don't want to be making too many unnecessary moves going forward. So in my defence this week, I've got Raya and Gabriel. On paper, great fixture, Southampton at home. Almost looks like a guaranteed clean sheet. But then so did the Leicester game last week, and look what happened. And part of me is now looking back thinking, was I too fixated on Arsenal defence? But I think that's just massively hindsight thinking, because if they had got the clean sheet against Leicester, I'd just be saying, they're great, I'm going to hold on to them for a while. And that probably is the plan. Like, Arsenal do have some slightly trickier fixtures between 9 and 11, which is Liverpool at home, Newcastle away, Chelsea. I don't see a huge amount of clean sheets there. But after that, the fixtures are great. So right now, the plan is probably just to hold on to them for the foreseeable future, unless I need money for a big move elsewhere. But I just don't think that Arsenal players are going to be at the top of my priority list to sell, at least not the defenders. I think long term, they're just really solid picks. So Raya and Gabriel stay in. Trent Alexander-Arnold, he's the one, I think, in this wild card where I definitely don't regret it, absolutely not. But he's the one where I keep thinking, did I need to spend all that money on him with the fixtures that Liverpool have got coming up? Because Wolves away was the best fixture of the next 4 for Liverpool after wildcard. And I just think getting a clean sheet in the next few games is going to be pretty tough. Like Palace away, I know Palace have not been great this season, but I would probably expect them to score in that game. Chelsea at home, Arsenal away is going to be difficult as well. And then even in 10 and 11, you're up against... You've got home fixtures, but it's against Brighton and Villa, both good attacking sides. And okay, Southampton away is not bad, but then it's Man City at home. So I'm not sure there's a huge amount of clean sheets there. Unfortunately, I've made the decision now, so he has to stay. And I'm hoping that I've got that wrong. And there will be clean sheets and he will get the attacking returns. But I just wonder now, is that a player that I could have downgraded a little bit to spend more elsewhere? Maybe to get someone like Palmer in. But again, I'm very aware that I wouldn't be saying that if Palmer had blanked. So I think Trent is fine, but I'm not sure we're going to see the amount of points over the next 5-6 weeks that we saw in the first 5 game weeks, because the fixtures were just so good. And then Rico Lewis is already proving to be a little bit of a headache. And I knew this was going to happen. And I also knew that eventually I would put him in my squad, despite me trying to fight it. And he could be amazing value. We saw how well he did in the Champions League in terms of the numbers he put up, expected goal involvement-wise. Fulham at home is a great fixture. And this is the problem with owning him. I feel like I've got to start him no matter what. Unless we get a leak that he's definitely not starting, I've probably got to put him in the 11. And I would look at that midweek game and think, well, he played the full game. Vardiol went off early. Walker didn't start. It's not that high of a chance that Lewis plays, especially with Foden back in the team now. So if Lewis is going to play in midfield, there's less spots to do that as well. I think there's quite a high chance he gets benched this week. But it's such a good fixture on paper that I don't think I can bench him in my FPL team. And this is the constant headache you have. And I just know down the line he's going to be a transfer I've got to make. And he could end up being amazing. Maybe he starts against Fulham, does great, and then I'm talking differently next week. But this is why I hate owning Man City players for the most part. It just feels like a constant headache I don't need. Especially when I got Pinnock on the bench against Wolves at home. Now, Brentford defence is not amazing, so they probably won't get a clean sheet either. But at least I know he's going to start. But for now, unless we hear any different, I'm probably going to have to play Lewis. There is a chance when we get close to that deadline on Saturday that I'll just make the switch and just go for the guy that I know is going to start. But at the moment, I think Lewis has got to be in. I just think I go back to what I just said about wanting to roll transfers and being happy with the squad. I already know that Lewis is going to be a transfer for me at some point, and I've set myself up for that because of how good the Man City fixtures were. And I hope I'm repaid for it, but it's not a guarantee. And also, it's not a guarantee that if Lewis doesn't start, that he won't come on. Like, he could come on in the second half, and that's obviously then a potential for a cameo. So, for anyone that's thinking about going for Rico Lewis this week, I wouldn't talk you out of it, but I just know for most managers, they can't cope with this constant headache, and I'm one of them. I just question, is it worth it? But on paper, Lewis Fulham at home, double Arsenal defence against Southampton, and Trent against Palace away, looks pretty good. So in midfield, Bukayo Saka makes it a triple up on Arsenal, and as they're playing Southampton this week, I'm pretty happy about that. I would say that Saka's not as nailed in my team long term as the double defence is, because there are other good options in midfield that I might want to go for, but he's certainly not someone I'm going to sell this week. Even if I had money in the bank, which I don't, I still wouldn't be selling Saka for Palmer. Maybe that's a transfer I can make in the future, but not before he's about to play Southampton at home. And when I was looking at my team in the My Team tour on Fantasy Football Hub, and as always, links in the description below, Game Week 8 is going to be a week where I have to decide like what I want to do with Saka and how long I want to hold him for. Because obviously you have got those slightly trickier fixtures between 9 and 11. And in Game Week 8, Saka's got Bournemouth away. So there's no need to go out of my way to sell him. But that is the start of Spurs' really good fixture run as well. So there is potential to sell Saka in 8 and maybe put Son in instead if he's fit and available, which we don't know at the moment. Because you've got West Ham at home in 8. And then in 9, when Arsenal are playing Liverpool at home, Son's got Palace away. And then in 10, when Arsenal have got Newcastle away, Son's got Villa at home. And then in 11, when it's Chelsea away for Arsenal, Son's got Ipswich at home. And then after Game Week 11, when Son plays Man City away, there's a decision to be made. Do I go back to Saka, who has got good fixtures for Arsenal from 12 onwards, or do I go to Palmer instead? And hopefully by that point, I've saved up some transfers to be able to make some big decisions. And it might even be that I try and work both Saka and Palmer back into my squad. But at the moment, with the structure the way it is, there's just one spot for them. And so I suspect Saka to Son might be a move in 8, and then possibly Son to Palmer in 12, and maybe even go without Saka for a little bit. But I need to have a proper think about that because Saka is one of my favourite players in FPL. And just quickly on the Palmer thing, I know I've talked about him a lot this week, as you might imagine after a 25-pointer. He could also come in Game Week 8, but that's when Chelsea have got Liverpool away. So I'm not sure that's a move that I'm going to want to do. And I'd also have to sell someone else to fund it. So it's not that he's a bad option. I just don't see myself using a transfer to bring in a player before they play Liverpool away. And then even after that, Newcastle at home, Man United away, Arsenal at home. It's not bad fixtures, but it doesn't scream essential to me. The only thing I'm worried about with Palmer is that he's going to go up in price to a point where I just can't afford him anymore. And from 12 onwards, the fixtures are really nice. But I just don't see him coming into my team over the next couple of weeks. And I could get massively punished like I was last week. But hopefully things will get better. Bruno Fernandes is definitely staying. When he was looking to be suspended for 3 games, I was really struggling on what to do with him. I think I probably would have ended up just playing Rodgers, benching Fernandes, not necessarily through the whole suspension, but for the first game, and just having 2 free transfers to decide what to do in Game Week 8. Because in single transfer moves, okay, Maddison might be fine, Brennan Johnson might be fine. I'm not going to buy Luis Diaz. If I was going to go for him, I would have picked him on wildcard. Brennan Johnson and Maddison might be miles better than Fernandes, but it doesn't feel like a move worth doing with one transfer. I might as well keep hold of him. And after that Villa away game, like that's when the good fixtures start for Man United, like Brentford at home, West Ham away. Okay, Chelsea at home's not easy. Then you've got Leicester at home, Ipswich away, Everton at home. So I'm probably just going to see it through and hope that along the way he gets some penalties and keep starting. Because I have seen some Man United fans questioning whether he should even be in the team right now. For what it's worth, I think it's highly unlikely that he gets benched. But maybe his minutes do go down a little bit over the next few weeks, especially if everyone's fit, like Højlund, Mason Mount, etc. Ten Hag might make some changes, right? He's under pressure at the moment. That's only going to continue if they keep playing badly. But for Villa away, I've got to keep him. And don't worry, I already know that Morgan Rogers on my bench is going to outscore Fernandes. He did really well last week against Ipswich when I benched him. He's up against that Man United midfield, which is not great. I know right now that's what's going to happen, but I can't play Morgan Rogers over Bruno Fernandes, and I definitely can't play him over Mbeumo. It's interesting with Brentford, they scored a lot of goals early and then not many after that, but I still think the fixtures they've got, Mbeumo's such a good option. Like, I love players like Mbeumo because I just don't have to think about him at all. I talk about him on a video like this because I'm going through my whole team, but he just stays in the team for ages unless he's injured, and I never for 1 minute even consider taking him out. So I love that guy. And then Semenyo against Leicester away. This is obviously one of the 2 good fixtures he had from Game Week 6. So I've got to play him again. Could Rodgers outscore Semenyo? Possibly. But I think on paper, despite how bad Man United have been, Leicester is probably the easier fixture. Although Villa are a stronger team than Bournemouth. So it's a close one. But I like Semenyo. And obviously there was a lot of talk about Smith Rowe the previous couple of weeks. But Semenyo's done really well this year. 3 goals, 1 assist. He hasn't picked up, I don't think, any bonus points. Oh, sorry, he got 1 bonus. Did he get 1 bonus? Yeah, 1 bonus in the first game against Forest. but he's not someone you'd expect to get one return and then a bunch of bonus points. I think I saw someone saying that he just doesn't make a huge amount of passes and stuff like that. So all the stuff that would add up to get him bonus. But I don't mind. If he keeps scoring at that price, I'll take it. And after that, you got Arsenal at home in 8 and City at home in 10. But I'm probably just going to bench him for those 2 games, play Rodgers instead, as long as everyone else is fit, and then maybe play Semenyo against Villa away in 9. And then after 10, the fixtures are pretty good. So I don't see him as a long-term problem. I think with a deep bench, which is what I've got, I'm not going to be massively impacted by a single injury. Now, if that's a player like Saka, where it's a lot of money being spent, then obviously I'd move him on. But for the most part, if I get an injury, I should be fairly okay, although that might be famous last words. So at the moment, Rodgers is on the bench. Is that going to be pain again against Man United? Probably. And then up front, Erling Haaland's got the captain's armband ahead of Fulham at home, and that will almost certainly stick by the time we get to the deadline on Saturday. The only other player in this team that I would even remotely think about is Saka, because Southampton at home is such a good fixture, but I'm not sure I'm prepared to back against Haaland when he's got Fulham at home. I mean, he's off the back of a blank. There's no Rodri, possibly no De Bruyne as well. Maybe this is the week to take him on. I just see that fixture on paper, Fulham at home, and I just don't think I can do it. It's such an obvious captain. If Haaland had, like, I don't know, Everton away or Villa away or something like that, I'd maybe consider Saka a lot more. Haaland's just too obvious, and I just don't want to back against it. So he's going to be in. He's obviously in. He's not going anywhere, and he's definitely going to be my captain. Solanke against Brighton away. I'm actually really happy with that pick. I saw some people go for Palmer instead of Saka and then Havertz instead of Solanke. And of course, if you did that, you're massively up on points. And I wish I could go back in time and do that. But it did cost more money as well. So if I'd gone that route, I would have had to take money out of another player. And so overall, I'm quite happy with the decision, even though it hasn't worked out massively in my favour. And coming up, Spurs have just got good fixtures. And if Brighton defend like they did against Chelsea, that's going to really suit Spurs. And I think Solanke's minutes have been great so far. Like every match he's played, 90, 90, 87 and 90 minutes. And after game week 7 against Brighton, as I've already mentioned with Son, the fixtures get really nice. And I think for 7.6 million, which is what Solanke is now, that is just such a good price. The only slight concern is he scored 2 goals. I mean, fair enough, right? He blanked against Arsenal, whatever, blanked against Leicester as well. 2 goals, no bonus. Whereas a lot of forwards, when they score, they're getting the bonus points as well. Now, it could be because in those 2 games where he's got his goal, it's just a single one and they've scored 3 goals in total. They kept a clean sheet against Man United as well. But I hope that's not a sign of things to come, moving forward, that when he scores, he's not going to pick up bonus, because you really kind of want that as well. But with the fixtures, there's just no need to worry about it. So Solanke in, and then Calvert-Lewin's fine. Newcastle at home. There is part of me that thinks go for Rodgers instead and play 3-5-2. And actually, when I look at, let me just find it here. When I look at my team for game week 7 on Hub, let me just reverse this a second. Transfer him back out, restore Son, and then go back to game week 7. When I optimize my team, it actually wants me to play Rodgers ahead of Calvert-Lewin. Because he's a midfielder and there's a chance of a clean sheet for Villa, although I'm hoping obviously Bruno Fernandes wipes it, he gets an extra point for a goal. There is part of me tempted to do that, but that would mean benching a penalty taker in Calvert-Lewin. I just don't think I can go through with that. And look, this is the dilemma when you have a good bench, right? In the weeks where everyone is fit, there is a decision to be made. But obviously, if someone gets like a 1-week injury or a 1-week suspension, I'm happy that I've got that player on the bench. So I think I'm going to have to bench Rodgers again and play Calvert-Lewin, despite Villa being better than Everton, because Calvert-Lewin will go and get another 90 minutes probably, or close to, and he's on penalties. I just can't turn that down. And in terms of him as a pick going forward, I just really like Everton's fixtures. I think he's just a decent option. Hasn't set the world alight so far in game week 6 like most of my players, but I think he's fine. Like the other player I would have looked at is Chris Wood. He also blanked. Now he's got Chelsea away, and Calvert-Lewin was cheaper as well. So I'm pretty happy with that overall. No money in the bank, 1 free transfer. No need to spend that transfer this week. Like I said, Bruno Fernandes is the player that all the comments are going to be about. They're going to want him sold to who? Like Maddison, Brennan Johnson. They could be better. They've already been better, especially in Johnson's case. But it doesn't mean it will be going forward. I'm just hoping that Man United can... I don't even need Man United to massively turn it around, to be honest. I just need Fernandes to put away one of his chances. It would be nice if United started playing better, though. So, yeah, I think it's fine. I'm not if I saw that, let's say that the rest of the season hadn't happened, and I know obviously you've got to take into account what's happened, right? It's information we always need to process. But if I just saw that wild card for Game Week 7, I think it was probably fine. So I'm kind of okay with it going forward. And like I said yesterday, if I can fall from 1.3 to 2.7 million in a week, I can definitely climb that much as well. It's unlikely when I'm going to captain Haaland and everyone else is going to do the same, but hopefully over the next few weeks I can start to claw some overall rank back. It's a long season. There's 32 game weeks to go. It's certainly not over, even though it feels like it. I'm happy with the team. If you enjoyed that video and found it useful, make sure to give it a like, hit that subscribe button, rate 5 stars if you're listening on podcast, and check out Fantasy Football Hub using the links in the description below. Otherwise, I'll leave it there. I'll be back for final thoughts tomorrow. Deadline stream on Saturday where there's going to be a ton of Luis Diaz questions. I'll catch you for that then.